This next tutorial is going to walk us through a simple program that's a bit more robust than the first example, which was the Hello World example. It's a looping program, and we've used the pseudocode that we wrote in the previous example to build it out into actual programming. And I'll explain some sort of basics of sort of syntax and structure so that you understand what you're looking at. So as you can see, we've got the title of the code up at the top. Then we've got some comments directly above it. So when program runs, it runs through the setup once, and this block of code is meant to set up the basic parameters. So if we look, we've got void, which is a data type. Then we've got setup, which is a function, and then there are no parameters inside of it. And then we've got curly braces, which indicate the beginning and end of a code block. So inside of the code block, we've got size, which is the function for the size of the canvas, and it's in pixels, and this is width and height. So this is 500 pixels wide and 500 pixels tall. I don't want it at 1000 by 1000, it's too big. And below that we've got color mode. So how do we define color? And in this case we're saying we're going to use RGB, and that will define how we define stroke, how we define fill, how we define any color attributes of anything that we draw, is that we're going to use RGB values. And the RGB values are measured from 0 to 255 for red, green, and blue. We'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. So as I said, when you run the program, it ignores this because this is commented out. It runs through setup once, and then it enters into draw, and draw is a loop. And so unlike setup, which it only reads through once, draw, it reads through continuously over and over and over again. So just like in the pseudocode, this is going to read lines 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, down to 29. Then it'll loop back up to 16 again and keep down to 29, up to 16, down to 29, up to 16. This is an important basic foundational idea to understand, because you have to understand that any values that you generate, be it a stroke weight or a stroke color, whatever those values are, they carry them back up to the top of the draw loop, and we'll sort of see sort of the critical impact that can have on your programming further down the road. So if we look, we've got again the void draw code block. So it's draw, there are no parameters, it's an empty parameter set. And then you've got the curly brace open, curly brace close, and you can see when I select that, it kind of highlights the end of it, because this is an important sort of piece of sort of programming structure, is that it needs those curly braces to always be a pair. There's always an open and a close. Then we look at background. So background is the background fill of the program, of the palette. And so it's a color that's 165 red, 265 green, 64 blue. If we go up to tools up here, we can look at color selector. And so you can see you can use this to sort of identify 165, 265, oops. Well, that's interesting. Well, it's letting me type that, but it will just max out, so it would be 255. And then 64. So the background color should be this color. So you can use this to either select a color for RGB, or you can You can also use the color selector in Photoshop if that's more familiar to you. So this shouldn't be 265, this should be 255 because the max value is 255. And then here we've got fill, and fill is also a color, but we only have one number in here. And the reason we only have one number is because rather than have a color, we're just going to have a grayscale. 0 being black, 255 being white. So we're setting a fill that is white. So if you wanted to express that in RGB terms, you just go 255, 255, 255. But it's unnecessary because we're just using plain white, so we'll just leave it at 255. We're setting a stroke color to 0. So opposite of 255 is 0, so the stroke color is black. And the stroke weight is 2 pixels wide. And then we have an ellipse, and there are 4 values to that. So let's actually look at processing reference. So this is the reference page to processing, which is right here when you open up the processing.org site. And if we go to find, I'm going to just look up ellipse. I can see it here, and I can look at it, and it tells me sort of the syntax, what it's expecting, what each piece of each parameter aligns with. So I've got parameters A, B, C, and D. So A, the data type is a float, meaning it's a floating point decimal number. So it can be a number with a decimal. It doesn't have to. And it's looking for the x coordinate of the ellipse, and that's on a Cartesian grid, which I'll talk about in a second, and the y coordinate of the grid. So x is across, y is down. And then C, it's looking for the width of the ellipse and the height of the ellipse. So if I want to circle, both those numbers would be the same. And so if we go back, let's jump to sort of understanding the Cartesian grid a little bit very quickly. So this is the canvas. Like I mentioned, size is x and y. And so it's x is the width, y is the height, and it counts out in pixels from the upper left hand corner, which is 0x and 0y, and it increases from there to the right to 500, and it continues on to infinity. And the y-axis is 0 in the upper left hand corner and increments up as you move down the y-axis to 500 as we defined it, but then to infinity. And the program doesn't care if you use negative numbers or if you use numbers greater than the size of the canvas. It will draw it wherever you tell it to draw it, even if you can't see it. In addition, you can also use negative numbers. So you can see if I want it to go off the canvas in a negative direction, I can have a negative number in either direction. So that's useful to be aware of. So here you can see we've got it x position of 500 and y position of 500, meaning right now, because we changed this, it's now down in the lower right hand corner, and it's 100 pixels by 100 pixels wide, so it's a circle. So let's put this at the middle, 250 by 250. We'll hit play or run, and there you go. So we've got the green background, we've got a white fill, a black stroke, and the circle is centered on the canvas. Okay, so the key takeaways here are understanding that setup only runs once, that you can go to the reference if you're unclear about what types of data you should be putting into each of the functions. You can use the color picker to select colors in RGB mode, or you can use the color picker in Photoshop or Illustrator. You can use 3 values for RGB, or you can use 1 value for grayscale. Everything is measured in pixels, and you have a Cartesian grid that you're using to actually draw on.